Last year, as of April, I spent $300,000 and I threw a big party. And
Oh,
we
wow.
had NFL players, NBA players, we had professional golfer, Olympians, things like that, to go ahead and have a big networking meeting.
Welcome, everyone, to today's Hero Capital Raising Show. I'm your host, Tim Mai. Today, I have a very special guest on the line with us, Mr. Darwin German. Darwin has been a real estate investor for a long time, since 1994. And he was in charge of over 6,000 units apartment portfolio. He has personally bought and sold more than $200 million worth of real estate, has managed over $1 billion in assets, personally raised over $300 million, have done a lot of things in the last 30 plus years. I'm super excited to interview Darwin today. Darwin, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So share with us a little bit about you and a little bit about you, your business model, and how did you even come into this world of multifamily syndications?
It's a very long story because I started off, my dad was a mechanic, grandfather, great grandfather were all auto mechanics, but all invested in small real estate, usually a small house, small apartment community. And he had me up every weekend doing make-readies. So I was 10 years old and I re-roofed a building. So
Oh,
um,
wow.
working in the industry from a very young age. And that was in Southern California. And he sold his automotive repair property and bought 120 units here in Dallas and in 1989. And in 1990, I moved out to help some investor clients that we had to go ahead and start buying units. Now, in 1990, 90 to 94, we bought over 5,500 units, all cash. Longest escrow was 14 days because there was title
Wow.
work, but we were buying 6-year-old properties for 20 grand a door. And that's where I cut my teeth and
Wow.
I that took over the management company in that my dad started. I took it over in 1996, reorganized it, dropped $1 million to the bottom line just from that reorganization, and ended up selling that portfolio in 2001. It was in escrow during 9/11. That's another fun story. I started buying my own properties in 1990, started with a 14 unit complex, 12 units occupied by drug dealers, and got a lot of great stories on that one. But then and I thought we were in a bubble. We were looking at a bell curve in 2001, thinking it's going to start to go down, but we ended up having a huge bubble. And after that bubble burst, I started syndication. So that was in 2008, 2009. I started doing syndication. And we've gone full cycle on close to 150. I'm sorry, wrong thing. We've gone full cycle on, I got to check my notes here. 4,000 units or so is what we've
Mm.
already gone full cycle. We're currently at about 2,000 units. But I was shocked on raising money that people would want to invest in my experience. So that was a fun experience. And the first syndication was 100 units in Saginaw, Texas, and I only had to raise $1 million, and I was terrified. How the hell am I going to raise $1 million? And then I started to realize that's only 10 people with 100 grand apiece. And so we were off to the races, but we manage our properties ourselves. We've got a deep bench, a good team, in-house general counsel, our own property management, and just got it started that way.
Wow. That's amazing. Share with us about that first race, that first syndication race that you did.
Oh my God.
$1 million. You were scared. So how did, so give us insights into that whole process. Who did you approach? How long did it take to finish that $1 million race? Because I mean, back then, that's a significant amount of money. It still is, but even more so
It
back
still
then.
is, but you can't get anything for $1 million down anymore. This was 100 units, like I said, 100 units. It was actually owned by a syndication. The syndicator had put it together with money out of Oregon, but the market crashed, and that syndicator saw that he wasn't going to make any money, and he walked away and
Mm.
left the LPs holding the bag. And they had a horrible management company that was just taking advantage of them. and they were losing money. They had to fund it. And the ironic part is nobody ever spent the money from Oregon to fly down and even look at the asset. We ended up getting what I think was a great deal on it. I think it was 30,000 a door. And the whole business model, it was all value add during those early days. And we knew we could fix it up and sell it. But I had to raise $1 million. I had put my last $50,000 that I had as earnest money. And so I was basically scared. And I don't sleep until I have a plan, until I decided that, hey, I can raise $1 million. That's 10 people. And just started talking to people, just friends and family is the first raise. And we did, we got 10 people with $100,000 apiece. And basically, I showed them the pro forma on where it could go. Now, we had a lot of struggles there because that was in 2008 and the market kept on declining, but we still got through that whole thing. And funny enough, I bought it then, and then I sold it to myself once and sold it to myself twice. So now we've had three different syndications on that same property, and each one of them has been making a lot of money. Like the very first one, our partners, the very first one, we only made about 15% return per average annual return for that first group. But then the second group, let's see, say two, oh, I don't even see it on there. We actually did a whole lot better. And so it's just been a great asset. We think it's a great location. So we knew where all the bodies were buried and knew there was continued upside. So we just kept buying it ourselves.
I see. So share with me about that. That's your I haven't heard anybody do it that way. So how does that work when you're buying it from yourself and yeah, and the process that you go through to raise money from new investors to pay off old investors. So give us insights into how that works.
It is a little bit tricky because the people, the partners on the group that was selling it were very concerned, making sure that they're getting enough money out of it, they're getting a fair price, as was the investors on the new one buying it, thinking, are we overpaying for this? So it was very tricky, and we've always been very transparent on absolutely every transaction, giving them all the details, full disclosure on everything. And there was an appraisal involved, so we knew how that was working. There wasn't a commission being paid by the seller. So the seller, which was still us, didn't cost them any extra money. And I don't remember how much we had to raise on that second raise. But at that point in time, I had already done a few deals and already started building my book of investors. And since I've been investing since basically 1989, we've done a monthly education meeting every month pretty much since 2008. And so that's how you raise money is you really provide education, you meet people, and you build that rapport and that trust so they know where you're coming from and what
Mhm.
you're doing, what your business plan is. And they also talk to a lot of the other partners, which is nice about having those meetings, is they can check in and actually say, is this guy full of crap or not? And they can actually talk with the other investors. And that's been very helpful.
I see. I do want to ask you about the educational side, but I want to learn more about your strategy of buying it from yourself. Have you done that multiple times on other properties as well, or was it more unique to this specific
Just
asset? Yeah.
this one particular property, we usually
Mm.
build a model that we project out 5 years, but
Hmm.
depending on market circumstances, we'll either hold shorter or longer. And we had gone about 4 or 5 years, and it was time to sell that first asset, but there was still plenty of meat on the bone. And at the price that we could sell it for, you think back at that's like 2013, 2014, the market was still down and there was still a lot of upside you could have with that. And we saw that as a good opportunity. We said, basically, normally, especially after about 2017, 2018, where people
Hmm.
really started bidding properties up,
Hmm.
you could still find deals before that. So even though we're selling it, we saw it was still a deal. And so because of that, there was still a lot of meat on the bone with it.
I
Why don't we
see.
just buy it ourselves? That was the bottom line is if this were on the market, we would be buying it.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So the reason why you were selling is because that was your like 5-year business plan. Is that correct? And the loan was up,
Correct.
or okay.
That is correct. Yeah. It was time to sell. The current investors saw that they could still get a good return on their money. And so they wanted to go ahead and sell it. And we said, hey, there's plenty of opportunity here. Rewrote the business plan because that's what you're really doing when you're buying a property. You're writing a business plan and executing that business plan to go ahead and create that value.
Right. It makes sense. I like that. Okay. So talking about, you mentioned about educating your investors. So what kind of education do you do for your investors? Are they education about investing in multifamilies in general or specific to passive investing? Give us insights, more insights into the education side.
I'm sneaky in a way. I'll tell you my secret plan here is I do feed them with a fire hose. And I will teach and tell absolutely everything because people that want to go be syndicators, once we go through, I actually did one class on what it takes to be a syndicator and everything you go through, pursuit costs and absolutely everything. And if I give everybody all the information, they say, you know what? I think I'm going to stay a passive investor rather than trying to be a syndicator because it's easier to make money and I don't know all of those different steps. And so I'll give away the information. We do education on property management updates, acquisition, financing. We bring in guest speakers to go ahead and speak and talk about market updates and everything else. And the main couple reasons, number one is because we do want educated partners that will cut down on the amount of questions and problems you have in the future. So you definitely want to have people that know what they're doing to invest. They got to be sophisticated at a minimum anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, it's a way to get more investors. So we make money on real estate, not on education. So we haven't been selling education. We just give it away.
I see. Now, I know you're in the DFW area. Is your education like specifically in the DFW area, or is it online, virtually everywhere?
We have an office building that we own in Las Colinas, basically Irving, Texas. And I put in basically a TV studio. We've got a high-end 3-camera 4K shoot.
Mm.
And so we have live meetings. We can seat about 120 people in our room. But then we also broadcast that live via, it used to be GoToMeeting. We're switching over to Zoom. But so they can participate wherever they are. But a lot of them like the camaraderie of going to a meeting, looking everybody face to face, asking those questions, networking in that arena. And we used to do them every month live, but because of being in one location, it was mainly the same people coming over and over. So now we've switched it quarterly starting this last January. And then in April, we'll have live meetings in our office. But in those other months, the off months, we're just going to be doing it via Zoom. And as a matter of fact, it's normally the second Tuesday of the month, happen to be third Tuesday of the month right now. We have a meeting tonight as well. And it's going to be short and sweet, but just to give an update on everything. Sometimes there's something to talk about, sometimes there's not. But one of the things we're going to do is give an update on a property we're closing next week that we've already raised give them an update on and market management updates and how to actually make money in this challenging time on properties.
Okay, so you've shared doing local meetups, doing Zoom now. What other strategies have you found to work well for you to attract investors, passive investors?
I've thrown a lot of money at a lot of different avenues. Facebook advertising, which wasn't great. LinkedIn, we've been doing a ton of LinkedIn advertising, and it takes a lot of touches to get all that. We do have an investor relations team. We've got 3 people here in our office that do nothing but investor relations, especially right now dealing with tax returns and K1s, et cetera. I'm getting all that out because everybody needs that. But I lost my train of thought. Where was I going? What were we talking about?
You've tried a lot of different avenues, a
Oh, a
lot of
lot of
different
different avenues.
marketing channels. Yeah.
Last year, as a matter of fact, last year, as of April, I spent $300,000 and I threw a big party. And
Oh,
we had
wow.
NFL players, NBA players. we had professional golfer, Olympians, things like that, to go ahead and have a big networking meeting because we had one partner that's associated with the NFL and trying to get us in with the NFL to get investors through that. However, in all the different avenues that we found, the best way to get new investors is referrals. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on marketing and everything else, and it's just not worth it. It's just
Mm,
much better to have properties that perform. And right now, even in this day and age, we never had any variable rate loans, so we're not in any trouble, unlike a lot of syndicators that went the variable loan route. But I've been through down markets before, so I didn't want to take that risk. But like I said, the best way is referrals and performance on your current properties. That's the absolute best way. And I'm not the one who actually communicates with most of them. I go out there on events like this and I talk and I speak, and then we route them over to our investor relations team that also educates them on utilizing their 401k, IRA, et cetera, on how they can go ahead and invest other funds and free up other funds to go ahead and invest. So we provide a lot of avenues to help people to allow them to participate.
I like that. And then on the referral side, do you have an active way that you go about sourcing for referrals, like, being intentional about asking for the referrals? Do you play
You
games
definitely have
around
to
it? Like,
ask. You do have to ask for the referral, and I keep trying to figure out how to get around the SEC laws as far as paying referrals, because we've got some people that have referred over hundreds of people.
wow.
And they don't get anything for it, but it's just because we become friends with them, and then they host home meetings with their own network. And the only way we've found to help people on that is by allowing people to do co-sponsorship different deals where they come in as a co-sponsor. That way they can raise money and participate. They can't get a commission per the SEC, but they can participate in the deal as a co-sponsor and get those sponsorship shares, et cetera. And that's been the best way to bring in other groups of investors.
Makes sense. Yeah. I like that a lot. I know you've been in the market. I mean, you've been through the 90s, the
2000s.
2000s. We are here, we are. What are you seeing in the marketplace? Is there another market that is similar to where we're at right now? And then what are you seeing?
It worries me when people think, oh, nothing will happen. That's when something happens, because if you can anticipate what a problem is going to be, you can address it. And that's not where the crashes happen. The crashes happen from things like you go all the way back to the 80s and they changed tax laws and banking regulations, and oil crashed. And in the 80s, that caused that crash. And you need to know how to maneuver through that. And in 91, they had another one. 2001, they had another one. 2000 was obviously the large subprime meltdown. Nobody saw that coming for the most part. We actually saw COVID. You couldn't see COVID coming, but when they started sending out checks and raising and printing money, we did recognize, wait a minute, they're putting all this money into the market, and the Fed's going to have to combat that because it'll cause inflation. Fed's going to have to combat it, raise interest rates. So in 2022, we actually 1,000 units thinking that it's time to go ahead and sell because interest rates are going to be going up. And as they started to go ahead and go up, got out of the market on those.
I see. That was smart. So,
But you were talking about where are we now? Let me go back to that.
correct.
Is every time in the 80s when that market crashed, banks failed, the resolution trust corporations stepped in, took all those assets, and they sold them just dirt cheap just to get rid of them. And so the banks and the Fed and the government, everybody learned their lesson on, hey, wait a minute, we need to do something else. We can't go the RTC route. Then in 2000, through that crash, so there was no RTC. They were trying to extend and pretend. They couldn't do it. Right now, you're having exactly that same thing, that wherever possible, they're trying to extend and pretend. They don't want to foreclose if at all possible. They're allowing you to kick your loan out longer term, and because they don't want this crash. They're trying to head it off. But there's the possibility that some other black swan event pops in there to go ahead and crash the market even more. And it's the unknown that you can't plan for. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen there.
I see. And what are you seeing in terms of, do you only invest in Dallas?
Primarily Dallas Fort Worth. I was in Maui and saw some properties, so I bought a couple of properties, a couple small properties there. We're in Lake Tahoe. We've got some properties in Lake Tahoe. I've got down in Fredericksburg. I've got a property we're selling down in Fredericksburg. But our primary market is DFW. We're looking very heavily in Tennessee right now. But breaking into a new market is tough. Here, I've got a 30-year track record with brokers and always performed, always did what I said I was going to do. So we've got a great track record, a great reputation here, and everybody knows us. So we get first look, last look, off market, et cetera. But you go to a new market and they're like, who the hell are you? So the only way that you can break into that usually is really working the hell out of it, get a lot of referrals, getting a lot of brokers and stuff to speak good for us. If not, you're just overpaying. So we're, like I said, Tennessee is our next market we're really looking closer at, but DFW is just
Gotcha.
easy to do.
So if DFW is easy to do, why wouldn't you just stay there? Because are there not enough deals there to do? Why would you even look at another market?
Right now, there's a huge disconnect between bid and ask. Every owner that has good debt, longer term debt, is just going to ride through this downturn. And that's why we go with long term fixed rate, usually agency debt, is so that if there is a dip, we can ride through that. It's the people that are in trouble had the bridge loans and are being forced to sell. And I see a lot of those just holding on by their fingertips, praying for interest rates to go back down so that they can actually get close to where their basis is in the property. But the problem is most of the syndicators were in high school during 2008, and they've only seen cap rate compression. And was it Warren Buffett who said, don't mistake brain a bull market for brilliance, something along those lines. When everybody that invested the last 10 years with cap rate compression, values only went up. And everybody
Mhm.
thought they were incredible investors and managers and such. And that's just not the case. It's definitely weeding out those that didn't know what they were doing.
Would you like when would be a time that you would go into a deal utilizing bridge debt or short-term debt? Your goal is agency longer term, so you can ride out any market. But when would you do the shorter term debt?
Value out is the time to do it because we've done some deals where we've purchased it and 12 months and 1 day later refinanced and got most of our cash out. But you
Mm,
could do that on the value add deals during that time frame between 2012 and 2018 or so. But there were so many people that came into the market, everybody snatching up value add deals. And even the difference between the cap rates on class A, B, and C got so compressed because everybody's chasing these C deals that it made sense to actually step up to A and B quality properties for the same type of returns, but then there was no value add. So that's when you went straight into agency. But the bridge loans, you need to utilize that as a tool only, not as a permanent fix. And that's a tool. It's exactly that. It's a bridge to get you from where the property is now to be stabilized and increase that value.
I see. That makes sense. Have you only done syndications, or do you also have a fund, or do you currently have
But
a fund?
you know what? I've had trouble. Let me rephrase. I have not gone the route of doing a fund. And we've got over 1,000 active investors, and most of them want to see the property they're investing in. So they didn't want to invest in a fund. They don't know what the deal is. And then with bonus depreciation, et cetera, we wanted to have all individual LLCs so there's not any cross collateralization or anything else, which you can protect in a fund. But that's not an area that we've gone after. Now, fund of funds like yours, if we had a deal that we wanted to bring to you and you invest in there, then hey, more power to you if you can go ahead and raise the capital that way, which is really good because you add a layer of service that, hey, is this syndicator full of crap? How are those numbers? When so many people got distracted by the bright, shiny object, and we're going to 2x your return over 3 years, and you don't understand how, then somebody who understands the how can be a middleman. Yeah, they get a piece of the deal, but it's also another level of protection for those investors in investing into a fund. But we haven't done it because we just go out and find the deals, raise the money individually for each one of the deals.
I see. Okay. Have you ever had to do a capital call on any of your deals before?
Okay, on a cash call, no. However, we have gone back. For example, there was a property we bought a few years ago, and it was on a bridge. This was a brand new Class A property. We put it under contract. It was 28% occupied with zero ready units. And so we took over that. And so there was no way to get permanent debt. So we did
Mm,
go a bridge route on that along with private equity. And as interest rates started to go up, we said, wait a minute, you know what? This is going to be bad. We got to get out of this situation. So we did do what we did partner loans. I don't do a forced cash call, but if we need additional funds, we'll do that partner loan. So on that particular property, we had to raise $7 million so that we could pay off our bridge and pay off our private equity and pay down the loan a little bit so that we can go into agency. And so it was a win situation because we went out to the market. We said, look, we'll pay 10% interest on your money. So the people that just wanted cash flow and they wanted security, that was ahead of all the other equity, and we pay a mortgage payment on that, on those partner loans. But that allowed us to be in a position to go ahead and have the property in a better space to be able to pay distributions to the partners then. So it was getting out of that and moving in. So there are times for raising additional capital. We also did that on another property where we raised an extra $500,000 as partner loans, not because of interest rate caps or negative cash flow or anything like that, because the property's humming. It just, we had inspectors crawling up our rear and making us do more and more work, which let me digress for a moment. In 2009, one of the properties we bought in 2009, it was in the hood, it was in a bad area. And because construction stopped, there was all of these inspectors that worked for the city that had to stay busy, but there was nothing to inspect except
mm.
for our rehab we were doing. So we had inspectors there, 2 or 3 inspectors every single day, which ramped up the cost. So it's the same thing we're doing on this one. So we had to raise additional capital to address city concerns. And so we just do it on partner loans, not cash calls.
I see. Very interesting. Is that a very common strategy that a lot of operators, syndicators use?
I haven't seen anybody do it that way. I've seen a ton of cash calls, and I don't like that because it dilutes the current investors, and it puts them in a place where they have to invest. And I'm saying no. There's other people that would rather earn 10%. They'd rather have a loan than equity, and so that way we can attract other types of investors that just want the cash flow.
Gotcha. So when you do it that way, do you set up like an SPV loan of some kind and then you raise that money as a debt and then loans it to the property, or what's the legal structure looks like to do it the way that you're doing it?
It's a very simple, almost a one page, it might be 3 pages, but it's a loan document individually from each investor that invests. So $500,000, we might have, between 5 and 7 or 8 investors that put money in, and they're all individual, and that's loaned. It's a loan document from the LLC to the investor. So it's not secured by the real estate because that would be a violation of the loan documents. So it's secured by the LLC, but because that's a debt on the LLC, it has to be paid ahead of the equity of the investors that are already in it. So they get security ahead of the other investors, but it's not collateralized by the property.
I understand. Okay. Is there a limit on how many different invest lenders that can lend to an LLC? And Is there such thing as a superiority in like when they land or anything like that? I get they're above common equity, but are they above each other based on when they send in the money?
No, they are not ahead of each other when they send in the money. No, it's all the same thing. It's if by chance there's a bigger problem and equity is all wiped out and then the loans have to be repaid. There's not a personal guarantee on those loans. They are guaranteed. It's by the LLC. So if there is a capital event, we sell the property, there's not enough to pay the investors, but we raised $500,000, but we only have $400,000 available,
Mm-hmm.
then it's a discount on that. So there is still risk on that, but it's way ahead of all the common equity.
So it would be discount among all of the lenders that lend, not just last, but based on pro rata of how much they lend in that
Correct.
pool. Okay.
That's correct.
Gotcha. Very cool. Yeah, I don't see it happens very often. I most do go the capital call side of things, but that's good to know. Always learning something new. So,
There's always options, and like I said, I don't see anybody doing it that way. They all do cash calls, and here's the little thing: a cash call is technically voluntary because if they don't have the money, don't want to put it in, things like that, they're just
mhm,
going to be diluted anyway.
mhm.
So what this does, this allows the people that if, for example, if we do a cash, not a cash call, if we do partner loans on a property, we're paying out those loans. So if you want cash flow as an investor and you're already in that deal, you can put the additional funds up and get the cash flow off of that rather than your equity.
Okay.
We just
Um,
like to give people options.
I like that. It's a yeah, very interesting idea. In terms of like your investor, if you look at your database of investors, what professional type do you find the most of? Like who's your typical avatar of your passive investors?
It is such a mixed bag. We've got doctors, dentists, business owners, accountants, lawyers, engineers, a lot of engineers, I would say. And what else? But there's everything. One of my biggest investors is a lady that's retired and she had a family business that was sold and she had a lot of money to invest, so she invested. We've got another big investor that's been with us quite a bit, and they work for the Department of Defense. It's not it's anybody that wants to make money on their money, and so there's no set avatar. I would say the average age is 52, probably, as far as an average age. We've got some people that started off, there's some real good success stories with people that started off investing with me. One of the guys on my investor relations team, a guy named Jeff Young, he never made more than $70,000 a year in his life. And he's been investing with me for, I don't know, 15 years. And he's a multimillionaire now from
Mm.
investing in real estate, even though he only made $70,000 a year.
Wow.
And so there's all types, and it's really fulfilling to have people go from making very little money to being retired with cash flow. And I still remember this was a long time ago. One of my investors that was investing didn't have a lot of money, but he was so thrilled that he was getting enough cash flow that it allowed him to go out and replace all of his tires on his truck without worrying about the cost. And I just remember him being excited that, hey, I've got cash flow to be able to do this. I don't have to worry about money. So it was very nice.
That is nice. All right. If you were mentoring someone starting out new, or even if you were to do it all over again, you're starting out new, is there anything you would do differently? Or how would you guide someone into this business?
I would say absolutely every investor says, I wish I would have started earlier. And even I would say that I wish I would have gone bigger earlier. So it all depends on where you're starting. I tell young people when they're early starting, I said, you know what? Go buy a fourplex because it's just like a regular home loan. You can then live in one of them. You have to live in one of them. You can get a low down payment, like 3.5 to 5% down, and buy a fourplex, live in one of the units. Even though you can't afford it, the income from the other units helps offset that cost. And if you buy it, you can live in yours for free and have the tenants pay for your units. And not only that, then you learn about leasing and management, and it gets your feet wet on that first one and live in that for 6 months to a year and then move to the next one and do it again and again. But eventually, at least in my case, your wife says, I don't want to move. I want to be settled where we are. And so eventually you have to stop that. As far as getting in earlier, you need to learn. Depends on what you want to do. You make good money, you're doing well, you just want to invest. You need to learn about the numbers and how they work and what the real risks are. We have private placement memorandums that explain all the risks, but they don't really comprehend that. They just know they're investing in something and they want it to do good, but you need to understand the numbers as a passive investor. If you want to be an active investor, it's just a whole lot of hustling, and you have to have a team behind you because no one sponsor can know human resources, leasing, finance, accounting, construction. There's too many different areas that you need to be an expert in to really provide fiduciary responsibility to your partners. And that's the thing gets me is if there's an individual investor that I'm now a sponsor. I was an engineer, now I'm a sponsor. And there are groups that say, retire, come join our investment group, and we'll teach you how to retire and raise money and invest in a deal. Well, you're not really retiring, you're changing careers. And now you're responsible for other people's money in an industry you don't have experience or knowledge in. So you really need to get that experience and knowledge. You really need to co-sponsor or work with somebody that can educate and mentor you through that whole process.
That's good. You mentioned that you wish you would have gone bigger sooner, faster. What is bigger to you in general, and what is bigger to you now? Like, how do you go bigger now from where you are?
I've always, here's the thing, you lose money for investors, you're usually done. So I've always been very conservative. We say we'd rather minimize risk than maximize return, which is also
Mm-hmm.
why we use fixed rate debt, which is why we go in there fully capitalized with enough in reserves and our capex, et cetera. And so you have to be fully funded in that. That's part of being conservative when you go in. And I also wanted to make sure that we had cash flow. If you go back to hindsight's 2020, the people that I know in 2012, 13, 14, 15, that quite honestly, they didn't know what the hell they were doing, which made it so that they were not as afraid because they hadn't seen a downturn or anything else. They just happened to hit right at the right market and they went extremely big, bought everything they could, and cap rate compression and the
Mm-hmm.
market just made them a fortune.
Right.
And during those times, I was like, I got outbid on properties because I wanted to make sure that the cash flow was there and that the property was going to be protected because you never know when a downturn is going to happen. So it would be, the advice would be go bigger sooner, and bigger is all up to you. If you're normally doing 20 and 30 unit deals, you need to start doing 80 and 100 unit deals. If you're doing whatever you're doing, go bigger. Like right now, things are on sale. We just bought a property that in January 2022, the seller was offered $108 million for the property. $108 million, and they turned it down. And we ended up buying that for $70 million. On a price per pound type of thing,
Mm-hmm.
it's a great deal. It still was, even though the cash flow, et cetera, wasn't all the way there, we knew that price per pound, that this is coming back. We're buying below replacement cost for a brand new asset. And so right now you can afford to be a little more aggressive because the prices are down. There's still too big of a disconnect between bid and ask because people are still trying to get out of deals unscathed. But over the next year, I think I just read that half of the multifamily loans over the next 2 years are going to be coming due. And if interest rates don't correct or anything else, then they're going to be stuck and they won't be able to sell it. But like I said, lenders are smarter. They'll extend and the government is backing on banking regulations, et cetera, so that they're not in a place where we force a crash.
So fascinating. Gosh, I wish we have more time. It's been such a an amazing time to interview you and dig deeper into your business model, the way you do business, the way you structure your deals, even your capital call. That was very yeah, that was so much to learn from that. Thank you so much for doing this
Sure.
interview with me. For the folks that wants to learn more from you, connect with you, attend your event this evening, where would you like to send them?
The best place to do is register at darwingerman.com, DARWINGERMAN at me.com. How about that? And so that has it on there. Or you can send an email to our investor relations team at invest at darwingerman.com, and they can help you out, get you involved. Like I said, we're not charging anything for education. You can listen in for free. It doesn't hurt anything. And we also do some other things like in January, just I've got pulled up here our past performance, our overall average on all the deals we've done. We've provided to the investor 32.6% average annual return on for all of the deals, all combined. And we even did a report card because they say rents are down, et cetera. Our 2023 report card, which we do for ourselves, rent growth was up almost 10%, income growth up 10%, NOI up 10%. And I was real proud of this one. The difference between my pro forma uh, that I did when we bought the properties and our actual, we actually beat that by 6%. So we're pretty conservative, like I said, on our numbers. But again, go to darwingerman.com, and under the events tab, you can register there, and love to meet you and have you involved.
Awesome. Yes. Again, Darwin, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.